What's up guys, I'm Dave Klein, and welcome to my Dark Souls 2 lore kickoff. What I'm going to do is talk about what we know so far from the beta. We learned a lot about the various kingdoms and a few key characters, so that's most of what I'll be talking about, along with some Dark Souls 1 tiebacks. So, let's go ahead and jump right into it.
My name is Melentia. You're a stranger to this land. Oh, we get as strangers these days. Everybody's gone and run off. Dranglake's been a pile of rubble since the war fought long, long ago. And the giants crossed the sea.
There are a number of things we can immediately pick up from this dialogue. The first being that at least a portion of Dark Souls 2 takes place in the land of Drangleic. Drangleic was home to King Vendrick, who was known as a just king. He gave high-ranking appointments to knights who demonstrated both valor and charity, and helped lead his country to prosperity. King Vendrick seems to have led during a time of war in Drangleic, as everything about him is tied to fighting. He would give skilled soldiers the Royal Soldier's Ring, which were granted to warriors who distinguished themselves in the service of King Vendrick. The king favored noble warriors who staked every battle on their strength alone. While it's not directly tied to King Vendrick, it's also very likely, given what we know about him, that he also gave specific soldiers the Ring of War, which, though the ring's properties are a great boon to warriors, few were happy to accept the ring, as it also meant the wearer would be sent out to die on the front lines. Another point is, King Vendrick didn't only utilize melee soldiers, but also had pyromancers in his army, as the pyromancy flame lash was commonly used by the pyromancer soldiers of Drangleic, though few truly mastered this pyromancy as its short range required practice maneuvering by the user. The interesting confliction here is that King Vendrick is said to have led his country, that of Drangleic, to prosperity. Yet, according to Melentia, since the war fought long ago when the giants crossed the sea, Drangleic has been a pile of rubble, and it would seem that Drangleic is indeed a ruin of its former self. The Huntsman's Copse, where the beta takes place, was where the undead hunts during the reign of the Iron King took place, and the cells in which the undead were held still stand there to this day. However, the march of time has eroded any difference between the captors and the captives. But if not the giants, who then was King Vendrick warring against? Well, according to the Dragon Knight equipment, though little is truly known about the Order, it is said that their well-honed miracles and unwavering loyalty in the face of death made Lindelt worthy rivals to Drangleic in their days. It would seem our answer lies in Lindelt. Lindelt is home to the sacred House of Osteria, where the Ring of Restoration, a protective ring passed down in House Astoria, resides. In the sacred lands of Lindelt, it was said that as long as House Asteria held this ring, the peace and safety of the people would be assured. Yet, your character finds this ring, and if the saying is true, that means at the time of the game, like Drangleic, Lindelt too will be destroyed. Perhaps the Dragon Knights in Lindelt eventually lost their war with Drangleic, or perhaps they too were destroyed with the crossing of the giants. A land we know for sure has been ruined by the time of Dark Souls 2 is Olafus. Olafus is known for the knowledge of the land, as well as Strade, brother-in-arms of the ancient king of Old Olafus. Together they slew Ancient Dragon and tasted omniscience. However, even the renowned wisdom of Olafus was not enough to control the peculiar magic birthed by his arts. The wisdom of Olafus was so great that only the lost knowledge of the ruined land of Olafus could have enabled the production of the Dispelling Ring. The Ring of Resistance too was crafted there, a fine example of craftsmanship from the lost land of Olafus, though the techniques required to reproduce it have since been lost to time. It is said that many lives were sacrificed in the making of this ring. Now, I know there's a lot of speculation that Olafus is Oolacile, and Strade could possibly be Seath. The black set is described as the set worn by Strade, so in my mind, the dual-wielding class represents what Strade probably looked a little like, and at least a humanoid, making me think he's not Seath. As far as Olafus being Oolacile, we know from the Oolacile Catalyst that the sorceries of this land are gentle and not affected by intelligence. It seems unlikely to me that a ring in which many lives were sacrificed to create would have been created there, though that's just my thoughts. What do you guys think? We don't know much about the land of Ferosa, aside from that the Order of the Lion Knights, a once mighty order who wore heavy armor and were feared for their nimble two-handed swordplay, reside from the land. Their equipment is blessed by the war god Faram, indicating they too were a warring state. A quick note is that there seems to be multiple war gods. The dispatcher set, worn by Tiny Gren, is blessed with the protection of the war god Nar Alma.
Do you give yourself to Nar Alma? Then you will need blood. Lots of it.
Nar Alma seems like a bloodthirsty god, so what does that say about Faram? We know even less of Volgin, except for it does provide some insights into the timeline of Dark Souls 2. According to the Red Tearstone Ring, Tearstones are believed to have originated in ancient times. Their rarity and value is such that there are specialist Tearstone miners in Volgin. We know from Dark Souls that the Red Tearstone Ring was found in Karim, where on the flip side, Blue Tearstone Rings were from Katarina. So it's interesting that Volgin is a place where both rings can be found. Once again, however, this indicates Dark Souls 2 takes place after the events of Dark Souls. The Miracle Heel tells us, miracles are tales of the gods passed down long ago, but only a small number of the original texts remain in their complete form. Those in circulation today have been devotedly pieced back together by the clergy. This again indicates during the setting of Dark Souls 2, information has been lost and diluted over time from Dark Souls 1. We also receive a few other key tiebacks to Dark Souls 1 that clearly indicate Dark Souls 2 is a sequel. The first is a reference to our favorite Sunbro. Lightning Spear is back, and it's described as a miracle that came into the possession of the Melfian clergy through ancient lore. Little is understood about the source of its power. Perhaps this miracle belonged to some long-forgotten hero. A clear nod to Solaire as we receive the Lightning Spear from joining the Sunlight Covenant in Dark Souls 1. Another miracle, War, is described as an ancient miracle said to have been passed down by an ancient warrior in the service of the Princess of Sunlight before his death, indicating a clear reference to Guinevere. The next reference we get comes from the Pyromancy Great Combustion. It is unknown who created the first pyromancy, but ancient pyromancies such as this are being passed on by an unknown practitioner of the art to this day. While we can't say who the unknown practitioner still passing on pyromancy is, we know that the one who created pyromancy was Quelana. This again indicates Dark Souls 2 is set ahead of Dark Souls. Another key note this leads us to is that pyromancies are in the game, yet they use catalysts, like the fire sorceries before pyromancy existed. It would seem to me that, over time, the art of pyromancy has been somewhat diminished in its power. What this also indicates is the Chaos Flame still exists to some degree, as all pyromancy is a byproduct of the Chaos Flame. We have another notable type of sorcery in the game, and this is in hexes. It is said that hexes originated as a form of sorcery. However, they were claimed to pervert the nature of life, and now hexes are forbidden in most countries. Galio the Hexer is the major purveyor of hexes we find out about, and hexes include Bitter Mist, Dark Barrier, Dark Burden, and Dark Orb. Dark Orb also being an Abyss sorcery from Dark Souls 1. In contrast to standard Soul sorceries, Abyss sorceries are weighty and inflict physical damage. Perhaps human souls, because of their humanity, produce sorceries with a more tangible presence. It seems possible that there's a connection between hexes, the dark, humanity, and possibly the Abyss. A final fun reference to Dark Souls 1 lies in the Hunter's Hat, which is described as favored by hunters skilled with a bow. This hat was based on the one worn by a folkloric master archer whose name is now lost in time. This seems to be referencing Ferris from Dark Souls 1. Ferris was an accomplished archer, and though he was human, he ranked alongside Hawkeye Goth. His hat is universally popular among children. Some other food for thought for you guys. Drangleic is not Lordran. We know this from developer interviews. However, do you think Drangleic is one of the known lands from Dark Souls with a different name? Or do you think it's something entirely new? We see a few potential ties to Berenice, one in the guard to the Chariot Boss's chamber, and another in the Imperial Shield which can be found, that looks stylized similar to Berenice. A certain man's favorite Great Shield, forged by layering thin sheets of iron. It provides excellent defense for its weight. Perhaps you'll learn more about the original owner when next you meet. An Iron King resides here, and we know of a certain Black Iron Tarkus, who was from Berenice as well. On the other hand, we find some statues holding justice scales, which is very reminiscent of Velka, the goddess of sin, who judged the guilty and met out justice. So perhaps a Kareem connection. What do you guys think of Drangleic? Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this Dark Souls 2 kickoff lore video. There are a few other interesting characters mentioned, such as the Pursuer, but at this point, there's really not enough to go off of yet. Hopefully this serves as a nice guide to some of the kingdoms we'll be hearing about in Dark Souls 2, and a nice preview to the lore. If you guys want to hear my predictions based off of the interviews from E3, you can go ahead and click on the link provided here, and in the description. And as always, I'd love to hear your theories and what you guys think based off of the various trailers, E3, and the beta. Alright guys, I'll see you next time. Peace.